While shrill is most often used to demean women who say true things that men don't like to hear, I had the honor of those neocon hacks over at the National Review using it to describe my recent review of the latest Call of Duty over at the Daily Beast. Feels good to be part of that club. I've never been much of a partygoer, and especially not a dance partygoer. I don't like large crowds, even when I know every single person in them. Really, the only social gatherings I went to with any consistency were of the cast variety after my high school theater productions, and typically held at the home of our teetotaler program director, so they were very wholesome affairs. Folks playing competitive charades or like Rock Band. God, I miss Rock Band. I spent so much money on Rock Band. After I left high school, things got even sadder. I went to exactly one college party, which was a school-sanctioned event on a boat in the week before my graduation. I spent almost the entire time leaning on a railing, looking out at the city I've called home ever since. My only real memory of the event was talking about the future with the guy with whom I would co-direct a pretty cool martial arts film 6 months later. And then the fact that he stopped talking to me to go make out with someone. Good call. Since then, I've been to exactly 2 clubs, both in Prague, and one only because it was in the bottom floor of my hostel, where I struck out real hard with a cute local girl who sidled up beside me as I leaned over a railing, looking out at the dance floor, and noting that we had the same hair, though of course she wore it better. It was international night, and she offered to get me a name tag with my flag on it, but turns out that while they had dozens of countries, the bad old US of A wasn't one of them. I made a joke about American exceptionalism that she probably took as something more like nationalism after I made a similar joke when the States was ignored by the DJ a few minutes later. All of a sudden, she had to go meet a friend and said she'd be back, but of course she was not. Good call. That same night, I went to Karlovy Lesne alongside the wealthy Canadian misogynist with whom I ended up sharing a room for the 2 nights I was there, as well as a pair of friends who worked on an oil rig, which is a pretty fascinating life, TBH. For most of the time we were there, I was awkwardly standing at the side against a railing like I do. Only briefly on the last of the 5 themed floors that we spent time in did I actually just get the fuck over myself and try to have a good time, to dance and sing and just be in the moment regardless of what else was going on. And that brief moment is the only thing keeping the experience depicted in Lovers Rock from being utterly alien to me. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Weekend Review. You can call me real awkward. And today I am continuing my discussion of Steve McQueen's anthology series, Small Axe. I've been excited to see Lovers Rock for months now because it was the film that made several critic friends who know how much I love McQueen's work reach out and tell me that this next thing he's working on is seriously special. One of those friends hasn't generally been a fan of McQueen's films, which can't relate, but obviously it made me more than a little bit excited. So I was surprised when that wasn't the film I saw last week, because even though both had premieres at the New York Film Festival, they weren't played in order. I can only assume that this was because the selection committee didn't want to open with Mangrove's ACAB energy, even though it would have been a very appropriate year to do so. But it does open the question of series sequence, and the fact that this is an anthology series at all, despite the fact that each of these is feature-length and could well have been released individually. Any good artist will sequence an album to make the best possible journey through their work, and an anthology series should do the same. And with that in mind, I think that placing Lovers Rock first in the slate was wrong, and that putting it second in the series is absolutely correct, the rest of it unseen. Towards the end of my Mangrove review, I talked about a section early on where the patrons of the titular restaurant go out into the street and dance for longer than you would expect. It is the moment of joy that characters are trying to recapture for much of the rest of the film, after it is stolen by Police Constable Pulley and his thugs. To be incredibly reductive about it, Lover's Rock is that scene expanded to 69 minutes. Set in 1980, Lover's Rock takes place in a Jamaican community this time rather than the Trinidadian one found in Mangrove. And while we technically start the film watching a young woman who is more or less our protagonist, Martha, sneak out in the middle of the night, things really get started when we see a house being prepped for that night's blues party, which will take up almost the entirety of the film's runtime. These were common at the time, held in homes because Black people in Britain weren't allowed into the more traditional clubs that white folks would frequent. They hired DJs and cook up curries and the like for purchase. The couch and rugs go out and big old speakers come in. The chefs sing Janet Kay's Silly Games as they work. We see some of the will-be attendees, Cece and Martha again meeting her friend Patty. Those two head on over, ready to pay, but the bouncer lets them in for free because it's always a pleasure to have such pretty women at a party. An experience my sister has had, and she dreads the point in her life when she loses that power. We'll meet some men too, the bouncer, Franklin, who will be Martha's love interest for the evening, Bammy, who you realize almost immediately has no respect for women or their boundaries, but they're ultimately just texture. Even Martha isn't the real star of this movie. The music is. Lover's Rock is not a place where lovers come to look out on some beautiful view. Rather, it is a reggae subgenre with deep roots in London, because that's where the name was coined and the culture thrived. The New York Times has a fascinating story about the specific music used in this film, as well as the broader movement behind it. Remember when I said that women were Lover's Rock's focus? Well, that's true about the music too. This subgenre specifically appealed to women and brought many women singers to the forefront, where men had traditionally been. And you may be wondering, Alec, what if I don't like reggae? Will I hate this movie? To which I would say, only if you suck as a person, but you'll like it less than someone for whom the music has significant meaning. But it's not a deal breaker unless you actively hate like all 70s music and the appearance of disco and dub on the soundtrack makes it worse, not better. Though if that's the case, get over yourself and watch Lover's Rock and let it change your mind, huh? Not that Lover's Rock gives a damn what you think about it. I wouldn't call it indulgent, per se, but that's also totally what it is. I just don't mean it in a bad way. There's a 10-minute sequence where the party dances and sings to that song we heard early on, Janet Kay's Silly Games, and that's all that happens. A few things get set up during that time, but really it's just a bunch of people having the time of their lives, and we get to be there with them. And that is what it feels like we're there. McQueen had apparently meant for the scene to be shorter, but the whole thing felt so alive and real, and he just couldn't cut. And I get it. In a way that hasn't been true in any other Steve McQueen film, Lover's Rock feels like it's documenting a moment rather than creating one. And my guess is that's why it resonated so heavily with that friend who has never liked McQueen's work before. It is really incredible just how transportive watching it is. But I want to return to what I said earlier about the film's placement in the Small Axe series and how it changes the experience of watching the film. Where racism was at the forefront of Mangrove, it's in the background of Lover's Rock. Obviously, the reason they're having this party in a house instead of a club is due to racist practices, but that doesn't really seem to bother anyone all that much. More concerning are the sketchy group of white boys who approach Martha when she tries to leave, or the cop car slowly patrolling that makes the bouncer bring someone he doesn't want into the house because that's better than letting the cops see an argument. Or the young white boss who calls his black worker boy. But these moments are infrequent. Heck, I just told you basically all of them. The recording of police sirens that the DJs play between tracks is another reminder, but also removes the power that they wield. They're taking that sound back. And Mangrove basically serves as shorthand. The face of Constable Pulley after that film's dancing in the streets creates a genuine paranoia in Lovers Rock as you wait for the other shoe to drop. This film can then utilize that feeling without needing to constantly remind all of us white folks that, hey, there's something deeper going on here. And that makes Lovers Rock's ability to then take your mind off of that paranoia even more significant. You can feel the power of this music and this party and these people. Their joy and celebration becomes an act of defiance. They will not be stopped or silenced. They will dance and sing and dance and sing no matter what. And that is beautiful, whether you like what they're singing or not. 8.5 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hamry and Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, Magnolia Denton, Elliot Fowler, Greg Lucina, Werner van Elfen, Liam Knipe, Kojo, and Phil Bates. If you like this video, that's great. If not, okay, go away. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you next week.